I mean, I watched a farmer today talking to Vanessa Feltz from Scotland, who said that as far as government subsidy goes, they get something like 86 pounds per acre of land that they grow hops on, or whatever it is, they malt for beer and whiskey. And when it's sold, the final product, the government gets something like £38,000 in tax.
Yes.
So, you know, it's been a bit of a myth that farmers have been subsidised by the government for a very long time.
Yeah,
and a lot of them are upset at the moment because of the green net zero pressures that are being put on them rather than the Ukrainian ones.
This is desperate from Rishi Sunak. His approval rating, Mike, is what? -43%. The gap between him and Starmer is the widest it's ever been. So he is desperate. This is clear, blatant electioneering from the Conservatives. Desperate to get some votes, any vote, anyone. They'll go to nurseries probably next.
I mean, that'll be next.
But these are their Conservative heartlands. This is, do you know what shocked me? This is the first, as you said, the first Prime Minister in 15 years to address the NFU. That's how much the politicians care about the farmers.
Well, and they need to care, though.
They were always guaranteed. The farmers were always guaranteed, and I think that's what means too.
And they've taken it for granted.
But
and then they start bleating about the Ukraine-Russia conflict and the food insecurity. Yes, we have food insecurity, and we should be growing our own. But 20 years ago.
But it's interesting, if you look at the numbers, so Conservatives hold 96 of the top 100 rural areas. It's predicted they're going to lose half of those. That's why I wore my tie today with the fox and the chickens on in support. Not FU the NFU, we're going to sort that out. What I loved as well...
How is the fox and the chickens going to get on with each other, though?
Well, they love it. This new harmonious thing.
Fighting away on his tie there.
I mean, I've had chickens that were eaten by foxes, so, you know...
It's the type of farms they have in children's...
It's not really a rural idyll.
If you've got chickens, you have to have a llama, because llamas will stamp on the foxes, apparently. That's what they do. Did you know that?
Right, well, that starts...
And then you need a dinosaur to stamp on the llama.
Yeah,
I mean, where does it take
you need a machine gun turret. I mean, you know, you start to get carried away. But, I mean, whenever Rishi Sunak goes to a place and says something, it's almost as though he thinks that's all he needs to do.
Yes.
Like, I've got your back.
Everybody
knows, one, he hasn't got their back. Two, he doesn't mean it. Three, it's a soundbite, you know, for the evening news and for shows like this, rather than actually meaning anything. It means nothing.
Because his rural constituency is in West Yorkshire, remember?
Yeah.
So he knows loads.
He does.
He owns a barber, and he's definitely got a pair of ways.
And he also milked a cow, which is what I loved. He did that once.
Right.
It's a great experience.
I mean, but the food business in this country is also interesting, because the other thing that is a massive problem for farmers is the cost of their production versus the price they get paid by the supermarkets. Because I'm told the supermarkets have got a terrible lock on things like milk, on eggs, on anything that they buy sort of in bulk.
Do you
they
remember
set the
when
price.
they were doing that 4 pints for £1 milk in Iceland? And the farmers were getting almost, like, literally nothing for their milk. It was almost not even worth them.
More on packaging is what happened on that basis. Outrageous. And you need to look at those statistics. People cannot survive at the moment unless you address these issues. So it's right that he should be doing this. Whether he's got those sort of people being persuaded, I think that's an interesting one. You've got a farmer coming on in a bit, haven't you?
We're hoping to, but I think he's having trouble. I think he's paid his phone bill because he hasn't got any money, so I think he's having trouble.
Can't afford it. Poor chap.
If the eco-warriors care about farms being eco-conscious, we need to invest in farmers. Let them have the innovation. You know, agriculture scientists and agricultural engineers, these are actual degrees that study. So let's let these kids...
Well, they go to agricultural college for quite some time, don't they?
Kids that come out of university create the green farms of the future, but for that to happen, less government subsidies and
green farms
money
of the
in
future,
the farmers' pockets.
yeah, but green farms of the future don't need, you know, vast swathes of land given back to rewilding, so that you can have a few more butterflies flying around. That's not what we need.
I was more thinking energy efficiency.
Yeah,
but
I mean, again, that's what's going on. They're being told you cannot, in the same way they used to be told to set aside fields by the EU, they're now being told set aside fields for rewilding, because that's all part of the greening of the economy.
Yeah.
And the other thing that they don't probably need is Sunak turning up at the NFU conference and promising 220 million for a new generation of robots.
Yeah.
I'm sure that farmers, if you actually gave them some proper support, would develop, as you say, their own technology, the things they actually need to produce food more efficiently.
Right.
But you should embrace technology, though, and there's a tremendous
Here's your AI guy.
AI, put the AI into Britain. You've got to look at that sort of basis. There are tremendous things you can do.
Yeah, until you get hacked by the Russians, and then everything you've got in the field doesn't work anymore.
To put people out of
It
work.
won't put people, there will be new jobs created.
That's what AI has done.
And it will also create
Do you know how
jobs.
fast AI is going?
Oh, I do, absolutely.
Yes.
I'm encouraging it to go faster.
And do you know how many people it's put out of work?
300 million
already.
what Goldman Sachs predicted, but it's going to basically be a co-pilot. If you understand how the technology works, it'll work on that basis. It is great for the farmers, and we can look at that sort of basis.
No one
There are
understands.
risks.
Well, it's
one
great for the
understands
farmers
how
if
AI
they
works.
want it. It's not great for the farmers if they don't want it. I mean, more interestingly is what the Clarkson clause is going to do, because Jeremy Clarkson obviously has had all sorts of, very well publicised rows with the local council about whether he can have a restaurant, whether he can have people coming to his shop, whether people can park on his land. They're going to suggest that farmers can be offered that kind of ability so that they can... And there are an awful lot... I mean, even down in Sussex, there's loads of farm shops that you can go to, which are fantastic. They're probably... people would say quite expensive, but the stuff is very good, and you know that it's good, and we know that...
And you are actually supporting local farmers.
Yeah, and we did a story last night about how the young Gen Zers are actually now moving back towards proper full-fat milk and full-fat cheese, because actually it's better for you, and it tastes better. Right? Now, if they can actually get away from... Because it's all very well taking the fat out of things. You take it out, you have to
add in a load
with
of
all
sugar.
sorts of other crap that you don't really want to be eating. So there might actually be a new demand for it, but the government has got to be more flexible. And I think the trouble for most of us is we don't know how quite tightly controlled the food business is. Unless you're a multi-million-pound conglomerate, you don't get the best of it. It's like in America. In America, almost all dairy cattle now are sold to McDonald's. And almost all beef cattle are sold to McDonald's. So if you're a sort of individual cattle farmer trying to make your way somewhere in the middle of Iowa and Nebraska, you can't do it because McDonald's will squeeze you until you give all your money to them.
And that's the problem. It's the same with the big supermarkets as well. The reason they can do such ridiculously cheap prices. And by the time you filter it down, you're left with nothing. And that's what's so important about this sort of stuff. Let's look at those figures and be realistic.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, because at the end of the day, people have to eat.
Yes.
And they have to be given food. And so the government has to be good on that. I haven't really heard what Labour have got to say about this. Do they talk about food very much?
They did at the NFU conference a year ago, but I don't think they've caught up on this.
Well, it's extraordinary. If you look at the figures,
they were expecting
that they haven't
to
announced
go.
any policies on this.
But they don't. In a way, they don't need to. They're up 17 points since the 2019 election at sort of 37% support, and the Conservatives are down 25 points, down to about 34%. And so you look at those sort of figures. They're obviously, by saying nothing, doing the right thing and taking just blame somebody else, and then the votes fall accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, because we end up getting wrapped up in all sorts of ideas about whether you should have taxes for this, whether you should steer people away from these particular products. It's a bit of a minefield, isn't it, for political parties?
Yeah, it is completely. And it does link back to the story. I was listening to that story yesterday about people moving towards... Because there was going to be allowances, and something farmers actually disagree with it. There was originally talk about tax incentives for vegan food. It's heavily processed food.
It's not good for you.
Very, very horribly processed.
Horribly processed. And actually, lots of people switched to skinny oat milk, and they found themselves not getting any skinnier, but actually with full-fat milk, they weren't gaining weight, but they were getting a lot of protein and good fats and the things they need to actually, for their brain to work.
It's so important that people get informed decisions on that sort of basis. People need these facts and figures so they can make their own minds.
And a lot of these vegan food products, when they're not subsidised, they don't actually take off. And we now know a lot of the science-based evidence supporting these products is a bit weak.
Well, apparently one of the reasons why scientists told everybody to stay away from fats was because they didn't think the public would understand the difference between saturated fats and other fats. So they just thought everybody was too stupid to get it. So they just went, don't drink any of that. Absolutely ridiculous. Anyway,